Ruined a marriage and my family for revenge. So I recently discovered this sub and had a personal story to share. On mobile, so forgive formatting / grammar / etc. Story is several years old. I've always been the black sheep of the family. Cousins grew up to be doctors, professors, creatives and whatever else. Meanwhile I've managed to just make a humble stable passive income through some business decisions. Nothing fancy, but I can afford a 1-bedroom in NYC and live comfortably with that and a part-time job in a cafe. Everyone in the family including my own parents judge me harshly for not pushing myself to do what my cousins do, especially my one cousin we will call Randy. Think the stereotypical dude bro who got rich thanks to working for his dad, multiply that by 10, and you got Randy. Anyway, he always gave me the most shit, and eventually I just tuned them out cause I get to enjoy my life with my work part-time and still afford what I want. So, to cut the bullshit short, Randy has a wife and 2 kids, he also had a mistress. I found this out cause one day when I was walking through the city when I saw him walking down the street with a woman who clearly wasn't his wife, arms around each other. I checked Facebook and saw he had indeed posted about visiting a bagel shop in the city while on a business trip that morning, so he had indeed in the city. So, I decided fuck it, let me see how this plays out. I followed them for 5 hours, snapped several photos, one of them going into a hotel together. I held on to these and waited until Christmas that year, about 6 months later. I decided to unceremoniously drop printed photos in front of everyone at the table before dinner and made sure to get his wife to see them. Cue screaming and fighting. I actually got a black eye out of it. It was Randy's dad who did it though, not him. Cue police, a lot of questioning, my so and I get kicked out. We head back home after talking to the cops one last time. The aftermath: besides Randy's wife and another cousin who hates Randy, my family cut me off entirely for several years. Whatever, even my parents had always expressed disappointment in me for not applying myself fully, so no real loss there. Randy got divorced. Lost full custody of the kids after threatening his ex. Family occasionally tries to guilt me into apologizing, but my response is some variation of not gonna apologize for outing a cheating cunt, and I'm promptly blocked for another few months. So and Randy's ex-wife are good friends and the kids call me uncle. Nick having a family who actually loves me unconditionally for once. So and I got married, and that's when my family last tried to get into contact with me and were actually nice for once. Seeing me moving on, I guess eats at them, maybe realizing their punching bag is gone for good. That's it really, living my best life now with a good family as opposed to a shit one. Try to strong-arm evict me illegally? We'll see about that. This happened back in 2010 when I lived in Winter Garden, Florida, with my husband and his dying uncle. Background: my husband and I moved in with his sick uncle after losing so much during the 2008 housing market crash in the US, like many of my husband's lawn-maintenance customers. We also moved in with his uncle into a condo because his uncle had stage 4 cirrhosis of the liver, and his self-entitled sister and her family refused to help take of him. My husband, a retired Seminole County Sheriff's officer, important later, and I got ourselves set in the condo's 2 bedrooms as his uncle had himself set up in the living room including his bed. On the first day, we found dangerous black mold caused by a leaky dishwasher. On the second day, we found the master shower had loose tiles and a leaky shower head. On the third day, we found a nest of brown recluse spiders in the living room. We talked with his uncle about these problems and found out that the slumlord, friends with self-entitled sister/aunt and her family, was refusing to take care of the issues as required by law. We wanted to start legal actions then, but my husband's uncle talked us out of it several times. The slumlord was nice to us so long as my husband's sick uncle was alive. The very next day after my husband's uncle died was a completely different story. Slumlord had turned nasty, aggressive, and began to try and strong-arm evict us like we were nothing more than drug addict squatters. Slumlord even bowed up and aggressively tried to fight my husband when we dropped off our next rent check. He kept telling us that we had to move or else, but yet refused to follow actual FL laws to evict us. Slumlord and his corrupt Winter Garden PD code enforcement officer wife even recruit my husband's self-entitled aunt and uncle to start harassing about just moving even if we had to live in a tent. Self-entitled aunt, Why don't you and my RSO nephew just move so they can rent the condo to another senior? Husband, we don't have anywhere else to go yet, and he must go through eviction laws or get into very serious trouble. Self-entitled aunt, you're nothing but trouble, retired SCSD officer nephew. You've been problems since the day you were born. Get out of their condo and stop being a problem for everyone. Who cares if you have to live in a tent? All of this made my retired SCSD officer husband, who specialized in uncovering corrupted law enforcement, very suspicious. We talked and began investigating slumlord and corrupt code enforcement wife. My first order was to place all rent into escrow with evidence of repairs that have been neglected. Second, I sent a notification of cease and desist of harassment to the slumlord and self-entitled aunt. Next, I researched public property tax records. Woohoo! Pay dirt there. Slumlord's condo wasn't registered as a rental property with the state of FL and was paying far less in property taxes than slumlord should have been paying. Property tax records also showed that slumlord did not own the condo. It was still deeded to his mother, which I found out had been living in a retirement home for 5 years before my husband's uncle moved in. My husband found out that corrupt code enforcement wife had been inspecting and signing off on hers and slumlord's properties, including the condo, which is against FL code enforcement conduct laws. I found out from neighbors in the condo that slumlord had only been renting to seniors with severe health issues. My best discovery, though, next to tax evasion, was finding out that the Condo Owners Association had a very strict no renting/leasing policy, meaning your family had to live in the condo and couldn't be rented. The revenge. Now that we had all of our evidence, my husband and I began to knock down all of the slumlord's dominoes. My husband went and filed a complaint with the Winter Garden Police Department about corrupt code enforcement wife and her perjuring inspections on her family properties. My husband has a glowing record in Seminole County and with the FDLE for having over 200 clean arrests and taking down nearly 60 corrupt public officials, including Child Protective Services, in the early 2000s. This background helped push WGPD to open an investigation into corrupt code enforcement wife. They discovered that not only had she perjured inspections on her family's properties but also on my husband's self-entitled aunt and uncle's property as well. This got corrupt code enforcement wife fired, stripped of her state enforcement officer's license, and convicted of multiple crimes. I sent all property tax fraud evidence to the FL's Property Tax Division. That got the state to investigate slumlord. The state found that not only did he commit property tax fraud on the condo but also on a property that he was renting to his son and self-entitled aunt's son, along with business tax fraud and income tax fraud. Both slumlord's son and self-entitled aunt's son were also busted for possession of illegal narcotics with intent to sell when investigators came to the rental house they lived. I never expected that much fraud to be found from all of this, but I'm glad it happened. The business tax fraud of slumlord affected self-entitled aunt and self-entitled uncle as well, since they were his business partners. Self-entitled uncle then came under investigation by the USPS board as he was the postmaster of Winter Garden. Self-entitled uncle lost his comfy job and pension after it was discovered how he was assisting slumlord in the tax fraud scam and for stealing money orders. All four were convicted of multiple white-collar crimes, had to sell their properties and most of their stuff, serve some form of time, and pay huge amounts of fines and restitution. Slumlord, his wife, hubby's self-entitled aunt, and hubby's self-entitled uncle along with their sons all went down for multiple crimes, both felonies and misdemeanors, all because they thought they could strong-arm evict us. Just proves how smart we tenants can really be when pushed. Also proves why everyone should know all rental laws and how to research public records, because it can save you in the end. I knocked the divisional manager off his pedestal. I work for a large global IT company. In my team, we are part of a larger extended team, and an even larger still divisional team. The manager of this division is called Raj. He's based in the States, and is what many would call the poster boy definition of a corporate suck-up. According to him, he is in constant video chats with the CEO, and has a lot of face-to-face interaction with him. He also appears on much of our division's promotional emails and photographic material, so he's a company-wide recognized person. As for me, I am a trench-working techie from Scotland. My direct manager is always happy with my performance, and I am somewhat known in our extended team, but not so much in the divisional team. Until this event, which was a while before the COVID outbreak, Although I was aware of Raj and his reputation, I had never worked with him directly. I got invited to a company-wide collaboration event in America, which we usually use for technical training and innovation discussion. We got there, and there were some initial social events and meet and greets. Raj was amongst the group, and his general demeanor seemed appropriate for the reputation which followed him. We went into the first day bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. I was assigned to a group of 10 people to work on a problem with some coding. All was going well, until we came to do some group presentations. For our group, a young woman named Natalie was speaking for our results. It all seemed to go okay, but after the session was over, Raj asked to see Natalie out in the hall. From inside the room, we could hear Raj literally screaming at her. Many offensive slurs were used, and we could hear banging on the wall as well. Natalie returned to the room a sobbing mess, much to the shock of everyone. Raj returned as if nothing had happened. This pattern continued over the course of the week. Raj would single out people for these one-on-one performance critiques. He would go into detail about how work was substandard, and how they needed to improve, all while taking group photos for corporate comms for the higher-ups, orchestrating shots to make us all look like one big happy family. I spoke to some of my own team back home about this in my downtime, and it does turn out that this has always been rumored behavior for him, just no one ever knew someone who had experienced this before. I don't know what the job culture is like for this role in a place like America, but here we have dignity at work regulations. Performance criticism is fine, but not when you are engaging in ritualistic humiliation of your employees. I knew exactly what I was going to do. For the next few days, I made sure that I was delivering more presentations than anyone else, and really making an effort to attract attention. As hoped, he asked me for a chat, and pulled me into the hall. He didn't wait for the door to close before starting his rant. Experiencing it firsthand was interesting. He claimed I had no idea what I was talking about, even though it had likely been about 20 years since he did any technical work himself. He was vile, shouting and spitting in my face. I also learned what the banging noises were. He would punch doors and slam his hands on the wall near me, as if to try and intimidate me. I was prepared mentally though, and just smiled and nodded during the entire rant. He looked angry that I was reacting this way, and by the end of it I thought he was legitimately going to burst a blood vessel. When he was finished, I asked him if he was done. He told me to get out of his sight, and that's when I did it. I gave him a Glasgow kiss. For those unfamiliar, it is a headbutt. And it is not the first headbutt I've delivered in my life, having been brought up near Glasgow. He collapsed to the floor in shock, holding his nose, which didn't bleed unfortunately, looking up at me. I leaned down, and in my most Glaswegian accent, I whispered to him, "If you ever disrespect me, or my colleagues again, I'll kick the utter fuck out of you next time, you cunt." I went back in the room, while he did not. Inevitably I got the HR call. Raj was in the room as well, and I could see that he had 2 black eyes as a result of the headbutt. I was asked to explain myself, and I told the truth, mostly. I explained about his abusive behavior, but focused specifically on the hand slamming, and how it had been intimidating me. It hadn't really, but I massively played up on this aspect of the encounter. I described the headbutt as a reaction when he slammed the wall right next to my head with his hands. I wasn't sure what story he had told them, but I was sent away after this. I ultimately ended up with a disciplinary on my record, but no further consequences. Other team members were interviewed over the next few days, and once the pattern of abuse was established, Raj was terminated from the company. The most satisfying part of this was the day after, when everyone on the course went out for dinner. Natalie insisted that he stand next to her for the division group photograph, black eyes and all. I have to think that photograph contributed to his downfall in some way.